Horror fans, Fangoria Frightfest presents 8 killer flicks. Full of thrills and chills, blood and guts, murder and mayhem. Fangoria Frightfest.
People ask me that all the time. You're kind of a one-trick pony. I mean, all you do are these Chucky movies. You're not known for anything else. And I say, fuck you.
This is Child's Play and Chucky creator Don Mancini's story, in his words, told to Fangoria's Tony Timpone. This is his screamography. Don Mancini is not your average horror writer. He attended prep school, was a star athlete, and had a close-knit family who encouraged and accepted his craft. But it wasn't a seamless fit into this Norman Rockwell painting.
I had a fairly conventional childhood. I wasn't locked in any closets or anything like that. So often people, when they meet people who work in horror movies, they expect you have some kind of, horrific stories, but I don't really. I was very interested in film from a very early age too, and was exploring that and made, my share of short 8mm films. I was very into the horror genre. I was really, as a child, really little child, 3 years old, I learned the word shadow from watching Dark Shadows. I was very into that show. And the first R-rated movie I ever saw was The Omen, and just really into the genre from a very early age. And people often, they're very suspicious of that.
Somewhere inside him, somewhere deep and very dark, he was able to create the criminally psychotic and intensely disturbed character of Chucky.
I am Chucky, the killer dog, and I dig it!
But even after watching The Omen, I was raised Catholic, so it had a huge impression on me, but not in the way it did on most people. I identified with Damien, and just totally would fantasize about how to supernaturally punish my enemies. And then I really got into Brian De Palma's movies, Carrie and The Fury, and I think it was that same fantasy of being able to supernaturally or telekinetically just give it to people. Probably was the beginning of and sustaining my interest in the genre.
His family and friends were always supportive, but his father was a little more leery than the rest, expecting a little more than Fright Night filmmaking from his son.
It was very important to my dad that I go to an Ivy League college, and I chafed at that a little bit because I was ready to go out to California, but I sort of compromised and I went to Columbia because it was in New York, so it was the one I felt like it was an Ivy League school, but they had a very strong film department even when you're an undergraduate. So I felt like that it was there when I got there that I really felt like I started to meet people who really were as passionate as I was about film. I remember when I was filling out my college applications, and when it said career goals, and I would write filmmaking, and he would say, no, put publishing. I think as I was saying before, it was just not really a common thing for kids, at least from Virginia, to want to go into film. And he just had his concerns that, maybe this was just a pipe dream, or maybe it was just, something where the odds against me were just going to be so huge that I was just, setting myself up for a lot of misery. So he was wary about it, but he didn't say, no, you can't. He just was constantly kind of advising me to have a backup plan, which I never had.
Mancini left Columbia and transferred to UCLA. He felt he had a better chance in Hollywood. He was right. It was there as an undergrad he sold his first screenplay, Child's Play, and his screenwriting career began.
I was only there for about a year. I mean, I dropped out. I never got my diploma because I sold the script. And when I sold it, the first thing my mother said to me was, "Please tell me you're going to finish school." And I went, "Okay," and I didn't. I just split because that's what I wanted to do, and I started a professional screenwriting career at that time.
Mancini's big break made him even more eager to be in show business. He had to make this work, make his passion work for him. He never forgot how he got there, and never forgot who helped him along the way.
When I was in college in New York, I ended up getting a job one summer on a soap opera, the soap opera Search for Tomorrow. I was literally just like, it's a 3-camera video setup, and I was the lowest guy on the totem pole pulling cables, but it was totally thrilling to me because it was my first job in show business, and it was actually on the show, and you're working with actors and cameras. It was really exciting, and I actually met actors that I've maintained relationships with to this day. In fact, there's an actor, this was back in the mid-'80s, there was an actor named Peter Haskell who was really nice guy, really good to me, and I'm just like this guy pulling cable. But when you're doing that, you're very conscious of who's nice to you, because often people aren't, and it's a really important lesson that I learned. It's just like one that it's so important in Hollywood, is to be nice to everybody, because you never know, someone you're working with one day, 5 years later, could easily be your boss, and I've experienced that. Several times. Anyway, so Peter Haskell, he lived in Los Angeles, and I told him that I had plans to, transfer to UCLA and do all this, and he was very helpful to me about telling me, about parts of LA. I didn't know anything about it because I'd never been out here before. So years pass, and Child's Play becomes a franchise, and then when we were casting the second movie, Peter Haskell came in, and I said, "Hey, remember me?" And he goes, "Oh my God, yeah." And I cast him, and he was in Child's Play 2 and 3, and ended up getting killed by Chucky in 3.
From the beginning, Mancini had an allegiance of fans. Fans who loved Chucky's satanic soul, and fans who understood who Mancini was as a writer, director, and a person, and what his vision meant in Hollywood.
On Bride of Chucky, I had a major gay character. It was one of the kids, just happened to be gay, and I thought that was, pretty cool to do that, just to have a kid in the movie who was just sort of casually gay, nothing made of it. It wasn't an important story point or anything, and he gets killed rather violently. Because to me, that's just kind of like, equal opportunity stuff. It's, straight kids have been getting killed in these movies for years. Why not a cute gay kid? But so there was no resistance to that at all in Bride of Chucky. In Seed of Chucky, there was a little bit. Growing up gay, my consciousness of my sexuality probably as a kid, it wasn't really at the surface. So my attraction to the genre, it certainly wasn't consciously about being interested in that archetype of the outsider or whatever. Although I think that there's a certain logic to that. But for me, my take on this, and I get asked this a lot, for me personally, one of the things I'm really interested in the horror genre is the stylization of it, and I do think that maybe that is an aspect of it that attracts gay guys, just in terms of fans, but as well as practitioners, because it's a genre that often lends itself to, for lack of a better word, a kind of operatic stylization. There have been a lot of films in the genre that are grittily realistic and work very well, and that is, an important part of the genre too. But for me, I was really interested, like I mentioned before, in the films of Brian De Palma. Really made a huge impression on me, and Dario Argento. These are films that are like extremely theatrical, very designed, very aesthetic. That, and traditionally, certainly that is a stereotype of gay guys having an interest in that. And I'm sure you can tell from my nifty ensemble here that I'm just like, I always go out and just dressed really well.
But gay or straight, killer doll or demon boy, Hollywood brass had its issues with the script. Can a psychotic puppet be too evil? Perhaps to some, but not to Mancini.
The first Child's Play is a little more of a straightforward kind of thriller, and in fact my original script before Tom Holland rewrote it was even more of a kind of psychological thriller. It played with the audience more as to whether or not the doll was alive. The scene with when the mom, Catherine Hicks, finds the unopened batteries and she realizes that Chucky has been operating all this time without his batteries, that scene in my script was more toward the end of the script. It was like the beginning of the third act. So I played with the audience more as to whether the doll was alive or was this little kid a sociopath, which I thought was, was creepy and interesting. I think that they wanted to make it a little more black and white.
But in order to play with the Hollywood elite, Mancini had to reluctantly let the studio heads toy with his baby.
And in fairness, you know, to the studio and to Tom Holland, I mean, I think that their method paid off because the movie became a franchise, and the character became very popular. And I wonder if the character would have become so popular if, in fact, rather than being a doll possessed by a serial killer, which is, you know, how it became in my original script, the doll, Chucky, was a sort of the embodiment of this little boy's unconscious fury, you know, sort of his id. And while that to me is a very interesting premise, it's less simple and it's less simplistic. Simplistic sounds judgmental, and I don't mean that. It's less simple, and I think that the simplicity of the doll possessed by the serial killer, I think, maybe helped the character become a franchisable character.
Charles Lee Ray, Chucky's full name, derived from the names of notorious killers Charles Manson, Lee Harvey Oswald, and James Earl Ray, was born to be a franchise. And with many births of illegitimate devil puppets, a custody battle soon began. And director Tom Holland wasn't backing down.
I would definitely want to say for the record that I think he did an amazing job, you know, directing that movie. I think he's very talented, and, you know, I think all of us that are still here on the franchise certainly owe him a debt, you know, because he did a really good job. But that said, yes, I had differences with him, not with regard specifically to the changes that he made, because that was his prerogative. I mean, he was, you know, he was the director, and he's a writer as well, and a very good writer, and, you know, and he was making changes that were certainly, if not mandated by the studio, certainly approved. So, you know, as much as I might have disagreed with those changes, you know, that's the way it goes. However, where I ran into trouble with Tom was that he, you know, gave interviews, including in Fangoria and Cinefantastique, where he said, "This is my original screenplay, even though the credits say it isn't." And, you know, that is just wrong in many ways, including legally wrong. And I believe the Writers Guild gave him a slap on the wrist for that. I was told by the producers, you know, Tom doesn't want you around. And it was, you know, it was my first thing. And so it was heartbreaking to me, you know, because I wanted to see it happening. But, you know, I had my revenge, because in post, I mean, David Kirshner and he had a falling out, and, you know, David sort of would started to, you know, seek my advice, not my advice, but my opinion on and certain things as the cut was developing, and we, you know, maintained our relationship that we'd begun from when he bought my original script, you know, back in '85, '86 or whenever it was. And I'm still here on this franchise, and Tom's not.
Life sure is full of surprises.
Revenge is sweet, but a sequel is sweeter, and Child's Play 2 was the beginning of an affluent franchise and would give Mancini another chance for creative control. But true to Hollywood form, it was control he had to earn.
They developed two scripts simultaneously, mine and Mark Carducci's, and I never knew anything about Mark's. In fact, David Kirshner never even told me about it until the whole thing was over, because he knew I would be very freaked out about it. He goes, "Oh, by the way, I can tell you now, since your script was chosen, but they were developing this whole other script." And to this day, I've never read it. I don't know what it was about, but fortunately, I prevailed. But yeah, you know, that happened. So at least I won out.
And what Mancini won was the chance to bring Chucky back his way with very little allowances.
It's been a long time. As I recall, I think David Kirshner had the idea to do the foster home situation. I believe that was David's idea. But other than that, there wasn't really any mandate, other than they just wanted to see Chucky a little bit more. I know that in my original script, I had some material at the beginning that we ended up cutting out, where we showed Catherine Hicks and Chris Sarandon. There was a scene that was like a sort of a hearing, you know, to determine the kid's sanity and stuff, where, you you know, they've got Chucky or the remains of Chucky there, and it's like, you're saying this doll is alive. But there was also, I also had the scene that we ended up using in Bride of Chucky, but the evidence depository scene where we see that Chucky is stored in the evidence lockers along with Freddy's glove and Jason's hockey mask and stuff like that. That was in my very first draft of Child's Play 2. But I can't remember why, but we ended up not using that. But that's the great thing about having an ongoing series. You can always like recycle the, I'll take this from this script, we didn't use that here.
With Child's Play 2 about to go into production, Mancini did not want to encounter the same hostilities he did with the first film. A successful box office gave Mancini the edge. Holland was out, and director John Lafia was in.
We saw much more eye to eye about how things should work than either Tom and I did, or John and Tom did. You know, we just were much more like-minded, and that worked very well.
And with the chemistry much better, the set was a kinder, gentler place for a horror film.
I have 70 hours worth of behind-the-scenes video footage from Child's Play 2. Literally, like 70 hours. I had this little camcorder with me all the time. If we ever get around to doing a special edition DVD of Child's Play 2 and 3, because I have that for 3 as well.
With an estimated budget of $13 million, Child's Play 2 took in $10 million its opening weekend. The studio wanted to act fast and ride the Chucky wave of box office success. But did they jump too fast?
We shot Child's Play 2 starting in the fall of '89, and then the movie, and I was writing Child's Play 3 before Child's Play 2 even came out. And then Child's Play 2 came out in November of '90. We were shooting Child's Play 3 just like a couple of months later, and then the movie came out that summer, so there was only like 8 or 9 months between the movies. And I think also that hurt the box office of Child's Play 3, because I think, you know, having learned from my father who worked in advertising the term taste fatigue, you know, that's something that comes to bear in a lot of industries, like, you know, soft drinks and stuff. I mean, people get, you know, tired of things, and you gotta give the fans, you know, time to miss the characters. And I think just 9 months between the two, it wasn't long enough. It always mystified me, because the same studio, Universal, had just done this with Back to the Future 2 and 3, and it didn't work. You know, so I thought like they would have learned their lesson, but they did the same thing with us, and then the third one came out, and it just, you know, it did okay. I mean, it made its money back and maybe a little bit more, but no great shakes.
Mancini knew he had to breathe new life into his fake friend. So in 1998, Chucky gets lucky and takes a bride.
Nobody makes Swedish meatballs like you, babe. Peachy.
Thanks, honey bun.
I wrote the character of Tiffany for Jennifer Tilly, and you know, when that happens, I mean, it's very rare that you get the person that you want, and we did. I mean, she read the script and she really wanted to do it. The only roadblock we hit was that the studio didn't really want to pay the money for her, because she was asking a little more than that they wanted to spend. So David and I sort of huddled and we said, you know, it's like, it's really, if we get her, she wants to do it, it's really gonna like elevate the whole thing if we can get this Oscar nominee to do the movie. You know, Brad Dourif is an Oscar nominee. It's just like, it's perfect, you know. So we decided that we would, you know, like dig into our own pockets so that we could get Jennifer Tilly, and it totally paid off, because I think that the two of them work so well together, and she's just such an original presence on film. You know, we all loved working with her so much, and you know, and that's why when it came time to do Seed of Chucky, even though her character was killed, you know, it's like, gotta bring her back, and not just vocally. I had to find a way to bring her back physically as well.
Nice tits.
Thank you.
The fans wanted Tilly back. Mancini wanted Tilly back. But 5 years had passed, and Focus Features inherited the film from Universal. And with a smaller budget, Mancini had to pull out the trusted friend card.
So we all had to take pay cuts. Jennifer less than the rest of us, you know, rightly so. I mean, it's her name is the one that's, you know, out there on the marquee, and you know, she's the one who's playing herself and lampooning herself and taking such big risks in doing so. So I think it was only fair that she not have to take as big a cut as the rest of us. But she did take a cut. I mean, she didn't get as much as she was supposed to get when the movie was at Universal, but I believe it was still her biggest payday ever. I mean, she, you know, was nicely compensated and well worth it too.
Oh.
And I was really fortunate because then when I was writing Seed of Chucky, you know, if you've seen the movie, you know that she does a lot of outrageous things making fun of herself, and I don't think that I could have gotten anyone else but a friend to do some of the things that she did in the movie.
No wonder her career's in trouble.
I mean, she's so game. I mean, she loves making fun of herself, and if anything, she pushed me to go further and further in that direction. The only thing she ever balked at was vomiting on screen, but I got her to do it. But it was like she really resisted it, and I really had to kind of badger her and harass her.
Chucky is born. Chucky kills. He finds love, gets married, has a baby.
Who the hell are you?
Shitface.
So what can fans expect next?
I think it's only a matter of time before someone says, let's remake the first Child's Play. You know, I think that, you know, the box office for Seed of Chucky was certainly moderate, and it was not as broadly appealing as Bride of Chucky was. It may be that for mainstream horror audiences, Bride of Chucky struck the perfect balance between horror and humor. Maybe for a lot of those people, this one was a little too comedic. I think that message having been sent, my expectation would be that the studio would want to go back in more of a straightforwardly horrific direction. Not that that would be my own personal inclination, you know, because I really like the comedy of it, but so, you know, I'll cross that bridge when we come to it, you know. I mean, I remember, you know, reading an interview with Brian De Palma once, and he described production as the tunnel. You know, it's like once you go into production on a film, you're in like 3 months of the tunnel, where it's just this relentlessly grim kind of death march, you know, where you're just, and it is kind of like that, especially with puppets, because it's just like, you know, it's like shot by shot, and that's how I just like, I kind of survived it. I just like just worried about the shot in front of me, you know, and I was pretty well prepared. I storyboarded most of the movie beforehand, so at least, you know, I had a plan, and I had a great crew. And you know, if I ever just sort of like got to a point where I was like, you know what, I don't know what the hell to do here, you know, and I had a few moments like that. It's like, I don't, you know, my plan isn't going to work. What are we going to do? You know, someone would, you know, it's like, oh, why don't we try this? Why don't we try this? And so it was a great experience. I had the sense that people really wanted the movie to do well for my sake, which was really touching. And I think people really appreciated the fact that I was not a screamer, and that I welcomed other people's ideas and wanted that kind of collaboration. You know, filmmaking is, bottom line, a collaborative medium, and no matter what a director says, you know, if he's claiming otherwise, he's lying, because it's just, you cannot get through it without the efforts of the whole army of people around you, and that's what they're there for. They're there to help you realize your vision. And even when it got really difficult, I always, you know, there was a part of me that was always touched by people wanting to help me out.
Jesus Christ.
But I was very fortunate that I had John Waters there for a couple of weeks, and he was, and the timing was just right, because I was just starting to get kind of exhausted when he was there, and he was so good to me, because he said, like, everything you're feeling is very typical. Every director feels this on every film. He said, filmmaking, it's inch by motherfucking inch. Is what he said. I'm only quoting him, so I have to swear. And he was great, because he really, you know, he said, you're doing a great job. It's so funny. I love this script. Your shots are great. So he definitely helped keep my spirits up.
But with all its box office and video success, and with all its cult following, can Mancini jump out of Chucky's shadow and have a career without the devil doll?
I mean, people ask me that all the time. You're kind of a one-trick pony. I mean, all you do are these Chucky movies. You're not known for anything else. And I say, fuck you. You know, it's okay, one-trick pony, but it's a damn good trick. You know, I'm still making a good living off of it. But you know, I've made a continuous living for 20 years doing this. So I mean, I think I'm very fortunate, and you know, and I think I'm good at what I do, and I've but like most writers in Hollywood, I've sold a lot of scripts that haven't gotten made. I've also done my share of rewriting, doing production rewrites on movies, and you don't necessarily get credit for those things, and I've done my share of that. So, but I mean, I would like to do things other than Chucky, and I still have hopes that will happen. But I feel like as a kid, I mean, I was such a horror fan, and to have created a character that has become an icon of the genre. I mean, that's just like any young horror and Fangoria magazine reading film horror geek dreams of that. So I feel really happy about that, and I'm very proud of it. And if all I ever get to do are Chucky movies, then it's like, hey, well, at least I have my little niche. It's a damn good trick.
I'll be back. I always come back. But dying is such a bitch.
I had actually written the Child's Play first, but then got hired to write Cellar Dweller, and then that happened more quickly, and I used a pseudonym on that. It's actually from a childhood game I had with my sister when we were little kids. We used to, our superhero identities, mine was Cat Boy, so Kit Boy. That's where that comes from. How stupid is that? I was gonna say, how gay is that?